The highly anticipated Jerry Dipoto show with Brock and Salk over on 710 Seattle Sports was finally held today on Thursday. And Jerry Dipoto went on to address the comments that he made in like the postseason presser thing. You guys all know the comments, the 54% comment, the doing a favor comment, all the things that made all of us very upset as Mariners fans. This is going to be a longer video. We're going to discuss what Jerry talked about in that little like radio show that he did, because he did walk back some things, and I listened to what he had to say, and I think that it opens up a light to what he was trying to say, but I'm still not going to let him get away with it. Let's just kind of go into this really quick and talk about the comments that Jerry made. First, he was asked about the 54% rule, or whatever he wants to call it, and he said, hey, I shouldn't have said what I said. Listen to it here.
The first being this idea of 54% winning percentage. Just trying to understand what it is you're trying to say. I made an attempt to try to understand it, try to interpret it. Can you explain what it means and how you arrive at a number like that?
Yeah, first I'd like to say I'm generally embarrassed by the way, at least, that comment and especially one other was received. And I just did a poor job of illustrating the points that I was trying to make. And with this one, the 54%, I just completely whiffed in my attempt to paint a big picture baseline of what, obviously makes more sense to me than our fans and media. Our goal isn't to be mediocre. Our goal is to win championships and then to play at a high level for a long time. And that's what I was trying to convey. It just, obviously it didn't help. And the best I can do is continue to try to be candid and accessible. And I feel like over my time here, we've done that. Players, staff, all of our personnel. We want our fans to feel like they're part of the team and at minimum have a front row seat to what's happening. I can assure everyone that we want to win. And the 54%, that if you look back over the history of baseball since, the divisional format came to be in 1969, in decade-long segments, teams that average, or achieve 54% of win percentage over a 10-year period or greater, they tend to wind up in the World Series and consistent members of the postseason. And, we're not trying to win 54% of our games. We're trying to win 100% of our games. And, the 54% is if you reach that bar and you're able to stay at or above that bar for a 10-year period, you're going to play in World Series. And, and I say that confidently because it's true. 19 teams have been able to do that in decade-long increments, 19 different teams. And they've 16 of them have played in the World Series, and many have won championships. That's what I was trying to say and it probably makes more sense to me. And, for that, I apologize. We're not trying to string you out. We're not trying to ask people to wait another decade. The significance of that is in this decade, that's what we're doing. We've from the start of the COVID summer in 2020, we have played at that level, and we've reached one postseason. We hope to reach many more, but we do it in a process-oriented way, and obviously I did a poor job of trying to convey that thought.
So first of all, obviously Jerry says, "Oh, I was trying to be funny," ha ha he he. And he realizes it wasn't called for in that moment. Okay, I can give the guy the benefit of the doubt. He's a very good talker. We're going to get to a little bit of that more later and what we want to see out of Jerry. But what I really want to discuss here is when Dipoto mentions that 54% or above. He's not saying we want to average 54%. At least this is what when he walks it back here. He's not saying that he wants to average 54%. He wants to be 54% or above, meaning in terms of mathematical equations and whatnot, 88 wins or more. Okay, that is a little bit more. It's easier to take that, to hear, okay, baseline, we want to win 88 wins. That is where we need to get to. We need to win more than that, but baseline, we're an 88 win team with the potential to win 100 games, for example. Now it makes a little bit more sense, if that's what he meant in the grand scheme of things, that we need to win baseline 88 games and then from there see what we can do. I can accept that. And if he would have just said it that way in the press conference, I don't think there would have been really any problems with what Jerry had to say. Unfortunately, that's not how he worded it. People were taking it, and including myself included, which, by the way, he still might have meant it this way, but now he's walking it back. Again, Jerry's a very good talker. He wasn't on Tuesday, but now he's kind of, I guess, saving face here and saying, on Tuesday, we all thought that he meant 1 year you win 60%, 1 year you win 50%. And so that, the averages come out to 54%. But over the next, from 2020 on, Jerry Dipoto is basically saying, hey, we need to win at least 54% of our games. That is the way that it sounds like he's describing it now. That is the baseline. Okay, that comment, I'm okay with it now at this point. Now, when he says he's doing the fans a favor, let's listen to a little bit more of what Jerry had to say here, because there's some interesting words and still some things that he said that I don't really like how he said, oh, it makes more sense to me, as the president of baseball operations. It almost sounds like he's saying we're stupid. I don't know. I'm not going to read too much into Dipoto's comments on that. But for now, let's just listen on to what else Dipoto had to say.
And just to clarify there, Jerry, the other comment was about the fan base and doing a favor, asking for their patience to win World Series. I just want to give you room to respond to that.
I was trying to use a little bit of humor. The question that I was asked was regarding the addition of big stars and what do you tell your fan base, if you don't deliver the big star, and, when does the World Series come? And the simple answer to that is, adding a big star is much easier when you develop the big star, and we'll look at our center fielder as an example, or, the longtime great center fielder for the Mariners and Ken Griffey Jr. Acquiring a big star from outside is also contingent on the big star. So I can't guarantee you, when that will happen. And I also have been, involved in professional baseball all my life. And to think that you're going to predict we will win the World Series is silly. You're not going to be able to do that. All we can do is continue to execute sound process and build a roster that is good enough to go compete with the best teams in the league. And we feel proud of what we've built over time. We do feel like that this roster is built to be a championship roster moving forward. And now we need to go out, we need to add more pieces and find the extra offense, find a way to solve some of our needs, but recognize that we continue to get better in a lot of ways.
Okay, so Dipoto does make a good point here. He's saying it's easier to develop the big star than try to get them to come sign with you. And obviously that's true. It takes two to tango, and Dipoto mentions this a lot throughout the rest of this interview, saying, we need the big star to want to come here too. But unfortunately, we also haven't heard the Mariners have even been reaching out to those big stars. Did they reach out to Trey Turner, etc. last offseason? We don't know. Are the Mariners actually engaging with these big stars? We don't know that. And like you said, developing the big star. Julio is the big star. JP, I would say the Mariners developed him at this point into what he is today. But reaching out to a Shohei Ohtani, yeah, it takes two to tango. But maybe Shohei Ohtani reaches out to you and you don't tango. Unfortunately, we'll never know from these other star players whether or not the Mariners reached out to them with an actual offer, because that's just the nature of the business. So again, I think we have to take what Jerry says very literally here. It takes two to tango is what he says, and we don't know which one of them is refusing to tango, whether it's the organization or whether it's the star player. We'll maybe hear more throughout the offseason if the Mariners made a run at Shohei Ohtani, but he just didn't want to go there, then sure. But also during the postseason press conferencing, Jerry Dipoto and co said, yeah, Seattle's why wouldn't you want to come play here? Ha ha ha. But now he's saying, oh, well, darn it. Sometimes people just don't want to come play here. It's a double-edged sword. It really is. I mean, I can see why people would want to come play with Julio Rodriguez. But then when you have a GM, making comments about how, or a president of baseball operations making comments on how, Cal is just kind of childish, blah, blah, blah. It's tough to see where a player on the outside looking in would say, that's who I want to go play for.
What is now then a reasonable expectation from fans for this team?
Well, I think that this is our baseline. Our baseline is that in the last 3 years, we've built up, an 88, a couple of 90-win seasons as we've watched a young team grow and how we transition to the next level, from good to great, whatever that looks like. We want to be great. And I think as, if you look in any business, across not just professional sports, but business in general, generally setting up a lot of good and executing sound process over time will ultimately lead to great. And we are going to add from the outside. And, I've said many, many times, we don't hang up the phone on anything, whether it's free agents, it's trades. We're trying to find the right pieces would like to find one more bat that fits in the middle of our order. That's an important thing for this roster. And obviously we have to address the situation with Teo. We go into the offseason with him staring at free agency, and that's a decision that has to be made. And minimally, that's a spot we'll need to fill, be it Teo or someone else. So the long season in baseball is such that over time, if we continue to strike on these things, I think that we will be great. And I think most of our fans see that we're making those types of adjustments. And for those who don't believe, the best we can do is try to deliver what you're looking for. But I can't tell you that we're going to go sign the greatest free agent that's ever lived, because I don't know if that person is willing to be here. So we have to, every street has two ways, and we have to understand that.
So Jerry shares a little bit more about what they're looking for this offseason, including another middle of the order bat, and possibly, depending on what happens with Teoscar Hernandez, we still don't know if he's going to get the qualifying offer or what have you, depending on what happens with Teo needing to fill that spot as well. And Jerry says, again, he reiterates that it takes two to tango, and especially he mentions the greatest free agent to ever live, probably Shohei Ohtani, right? I'm assuming that's who he's talking about. Obviously, they want him in Seattle, but does Shohei want to come to Seattle? But also, is Seattle willing to offer Shohei Ohtani the contract that he deserves and that he's earned? That's the real question here. Dipoto goes on to talk about how they're very proud of what they've built and that now it's time to go out and make it better. And he's right. They should be proud of what they built. In my opinion, what they've built is the best Mariners product that we have seen on the field in the last 20 years. I mentioned this before. This is the second best winning percentage over a 3-year period in the history of the Seattle Mariners, behind 2001, 2, and 3. So I look at this and I'm like, yeah, how can you not be at least somewhat proud? And it's easy to see the direction of this team. They're getting better. You look at it, but it felt like this year was a step back. And Jerry Dipoto talks about how this year was actually a step forward.
You understand how fans didn't see this year as a step forward, especially since the team won fewer games and they felt they had been promised the opportunity to go even farther than the year before.
Well, I hope that given a moment to step away from the emotion, and when I say that we made improvement in a lot of ways, we got better at everything short of two things. We struck out too much, and we didn't win as many games as we won last year. But the components, everything that we did on the field, putting the ball in play, creating traffic, pitching, everything that we did year over year was a step forward in how we executed the fundamentals of baseball. Picking it up, throwing it over, pitching it. We were generally good at all those things. We have a good team. And we fell short. We didn't convert those to wins. And I think Scott said it best on Tuesday. We just, we lacked the clutch gene. The thing that we have done so well for many years, and this dates back, even when our teams weren't as good as this one is now, we've always been very good at converting the one-run wins, winning those tight games at the end, in the extra innings, and, the big hit. We're in that big moment. We just didn't have that gene this year. And I don't think it's reflective of the talent of our players. It might be reflective of the fact that we may have been a player short on the roster construction. And again, that's something I need to resolve. And you start focusing on the wins, you play a little bit like we played in September, where the end goal, if the end goal is the win, you lose sight of executing the fundamental. And we did get better at the fundamentals. We need to get a lot better at some of them than we did, and especially the idea of putting the ball in play. But that's what we were trying to.
It's easy to understand how Jerry Dipoto thinks that this was a step forward for a lot of players on the team, individual players, but the team as a whole, I would say no, this was not a step forward. And I think it's just maybe a miscommunication here of what Dipoto is trying to say. Yeah, some guys took a step forward, JP obviously being the biggest. I think Cal took a step forward this year. Julio did somewhat. But when you look at the team as a whole, you cannot look at a team that lost more games this year than they did last year and say it's a step forward necessarily. Were you closer to winning the division this year? Absolutely. But is that based on how good you were or how poor the play was of the teams around you? It's really, really tough to say. exactly how you look at it. When you look at this team, he also says maybe we were a bat short. You were. We've been saying that since the offseason. You're a bat short. You need to add one more player. It's clear. Everybody was saying that, but somehow the GM and the president of baseball operations did not see that. It is beyond me how they can call this a step forward when the obvious was right there in front of them the whole time. Again, I agree that a lot of players took a step forward, but the team as a whole, they just didn't.
That the margin for error could be larger, that with more talent or whatever it may be, you don't find yourself in a position where those couple of games, those couple of moments end up, those couple of one-run games or extra inning games end up becoming so impactful for how a season ends.
Well, I guess I don't know if I agree with that. And, my thought there is, if you look across our team, I think we were second we led the American League in ERA. Our bullpen was one of the 3 best bullpens in the league throughout the year, including over the course of the last 2 months of the season. And our offense progressively got better and better. And, it's every team from the Dodgers and Orioles, this year's best teams, the Braves, they're going to have moments of struggle. They're going to have close games where they come up short. And, would I love to stumble into the biggest stars in the universe that are happy to come play in Seattle? Sure. And I think we have some. I think we have some that are developing on our roster. I know we have some all-star type talents that are developing in our system, and we'll be diligent in our attempts to go out and acquire players like that. But, teams are made up of 26 players. It's not a one-man show. It's not, I would love to be a 110-win team that's running off like a juggernaut with stars at every position. And, I just don't know that that's possible. That's a moment in time, and hopefully we can look forward. And I don't know what year that is. I don't know when it is in our development that we're looking at a team right now that's for 4 consecutive years. This year I think tied with Oakland for the youngest team in the division. It's the 4th year that we've been the youngest team, and we win. And now we need to turn wins into playoff. We need to turn them into outcomes. We need to turn them into World Series. But our players need to focus on what's happening in the moment on the field. And if along the way, me and Justin, our front office, our scouting group can deliver them, that the freight train that can come through and join the middle of the lineup, I would love to do that. But I can't tell Cal or I can't tell JP. I can't tell them we will deliver that to you, because there are two roads. There are 2 people involved in that decision.
Raising the floor is something that I've talked about a lot with this Mariners team, or I guess giving you more room for error, because that is something this Mariners team doesn't have. Ty France was bad this year, but you didn't have a backup plan. You didn't have a plan B for that to happen. And therefore, Ty France had to play the whole year. Looking at this Mariners team, it's very easy to see that, hey, maybe if we would have had a plan for this situation, we could have won an extra 1 or 2 games. So Jerry saying, I don't really understand what that means. I don't agree with that. Makes no sense to me. Your bench was, in my opinion, one of the worst benches in all of baseball. There's nobody on that bench that you could really trust day in and day out. And again, your backup plans for if a Eugenio Suarez got hurt, Jose Caballero at third base, that's a terrible backup plan. Your backup plan if Ty France got hurt, well, they were throwing Sam Haggerty and Dylan Moore over there. So I think that when you look at this team and you look at what you saw this year, the biggest problem, maybe not the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems was that there was no backup plan. There was no safety net around this team. And that's what fans want. They want a safety net where if things don't go exactly as you plan it, then you have a way to mitigate that. And for the rotation, it worked out well for the Mariners because obviously Robbie Ray got hurt, Marco Gonzalez got hurt, Bryce Miller and Brian Wu were able to step right into those spots and be at least league average or better starting pitchers for the Mariners. But that's not always going to happen that way. That was luck and, of course, the skill of those 2 guys. But on the offensive side of things, you don't have that option. You need to go out and add guys who, if someone gets hurt, if Julio gets hurt, you need to add another star-studded player in center field that can take over for him. And so you're not missing that at-bat so much. If, let's say, Ty France is bad again next year, you have to have somebody over at first base who can take over and mitigate the loss of what used to be a league average or better player. And a lot of that goes into, free agents, trades, what have you, getting the big name guy. And of course, we heard about Cal Raleigh's comments, but what did Jerry have to say about those comments made by Cal Raleigh? And was Cal forced to apologize? Let's listen.
AJ Pierzynski, that Cal was, quote, forcibly scolded and told to apologize.
No, never happened. And I don't speak with AJ Pierzynski. I did speak to Cal after he spoke to the media, and no one spoke to Cal. And this is very similar to not too long ago when George Kirby, spoke to the media. We did not speak to Cal, and I said it on Tuesday. Cal has his opinions, and he is free to share them, and that is true of all of our players, and we don't begrudge them that. And I said it to Cal. Hey, I appreciate the fact that you feel that way. We all want to win, and that was the conversation that I had with Cal. There's no forcible scalding. Frankly, we didn't even ask him to apologize. I didn't know he made the comments until I woke up on Sunday morning. And my guess is, and I know this to be true because he said it to me, he doesn't want to walk back the idea that we need to improve and find ways to get better and to win. And with that, we're in full agreement. And I can't express it in a different way. But to think that we're picking up the phone and calling or scalding somebody is crazy.
So we've now heard from Jerry Dipoto and Ryan Divish that Cal Raleigh was not forced to apologize. I don't know where AJ Pierzynski got this, but I'm going to go with, Ryan Divish and Jerry Dipoto's comment saying that Cal was not forced to do it. He did it on his own volition, compared to some guy who I don't even know if he's ever actually spoken to Cal Raleigh. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure AJ Pierzynski is, very tuned in. I just don't necessarily think it was his place to talk about the situation. And again, Ryan Divish said that didn't happen, and so did Jerry Dipoto, guys who are much more tuned into the Seattle Mariners. But going on to this, Jerry Dipoto talked about what it was like to have JP and Cal make comments about needing to go out and get the big name player. And I think Jerry's comments specifically were very interesting at this point.
I know it all. It's their team, and they should ask questions about the future. And I said this during the presser as well, for Cal, and I said this to Cal, for Julio, for Logan and George, for Jared Kelnick, for so many of our players. Sunday's game was the first game that they've ever played as major league players that didn't have playoff implications. That's how far we've come in our organization's, development, our building. And it was a weird feeling for those guys. They didn't know what it was like to come to the ballpark and not have that game matter in the outcome of the season. And they should ask questions. But at the end of the day, we look around the field, and from Cal Raleigh to a year ago, Ty France is an all-star. J.P. Crawford just had one of the great shortstop seasons in the history of the organization. Gino has been a rock for us for 2 years. Julio has developed into a star. Our rotation, was clearly, if not the best in the league, one of them, for throughout the course. And sometimes, introspection is the hardest part of what we do. And each one of us, myself, first and foremost, could have done more to make up the one game that keeps us at home, or the two games that keep us from winning the division. We don't have a huge gap to close. We have focus, concentration. We need to fill out a roster that makes more sense than the one that I put together to start the season. And we'll get back after it and do the best that we can.
I respect the fact that Jerry's cool with JP and Cal, the leaders of this team, asking questions, and he says, yeah, they should be. And he's right. These players, it is their team. He's just the one running the ship. But when it all comes down to it, they're the ones in the trenches every single day. I had no problems with Jerry's comments here. I think that this is something we need to see more of. Guys like Julio and Cal say, okay, what is the real plan here? Because if the plan's not in focus for them, why are they going to go out every day and actually live through it when they don't even know what's happening with the front office and their own baseball team? So I like that there's a little bit of a communication there. I would love to see that be, I guess, on a larger scale. I would like to see the whole team be like, hey, yo, Jerry, real talk, what's going on? Obviously, there's only so much Jerry Dipoto can say, but no problems with the comments there. Jerry also talked about winning over a long period of time and what other teams have done to make this happen. I think this part's very interesting, and I have a lot to say on it after the fact.
Is there any trend line that points to a team or an organization going from good to great, going from a 90 to an upper 90s, going to that next step? Is there anything over your decades of data that show what those teams have done?
Yeah, and this is where, you know, my reference points just fall flat. And again, I apologize if people didn't understand where I was trying to go. But the reality is, those good to great teams, when your prime players are playing in their peak years, and I've said this on these airways for many years now, and again, just trying to be candid, you know, players generally reach their peak seasons between the ages of 26 and 29, 30 years old. And, you know, and this team, our average age is at the low end of that spectrum. And, you know, next year, a lot of those players, and you can look at this year, some of the players that this year really stood out are right in the peak of their careers. You know, guys like JP, and, you know, this group is just reaching that point. You know, next year we'll line up with Logan and Cal and George all entering that stage in their career. And, you know, look around the field. Who knows what Julio is going to look like when he gets to that stage of his career. He's still just 22 years old. And, you know, that's the good to great moment. And along the way, you know, like we did with Luis Castillo, like we did with Robbie Ray, you know, frankly, I like it turned out with Teo. We'll constantly try to add impact talent to help push us over that next level. And sometimes it'll be long-term, like a Louis, and sometimes it'll be more of a short-term hit. But, you know, the goal is to consistently put as big a talent as we can out on the field, because we feel like the foundation of this team is entering the peak of its potential. And we're not doing it for a year. We want to do this for many years. We want to win championships over time. And, you know, and that it's unfortunate that there is no magic sauce. There isn't two major, you know, every team that ever achieves greatness adds, you know, a right-handed 40 home run hitter with a 350 on base. That's really not everybody does it a little bit differently, but it's about the function of the core of your team. And the core of this team is really good. And I don't want people to forget that.
This Mariners product is probably one of the most sustainable that we've seen in the last decade. I don't disagree with Jerry Dipoto on that. And he says that there is not one way, there's more than one way to skin a cat, as Cal put it in his, you know, interview last week. I think that Jerry Dipoto is on the right track here. I think realistically, this team, I have all the faith in the world that this team that we are seeing with the Seattle Mariners right now is the team that's going to make it to the World Series for the first time in this franchise's history. I really do. But it is more of the unwillingness that we have seen for, you know, Jerry Dipoto and co to go out and get the big name free agent. Robbie Ray, sure, coming off of a Cy Young season, but, you know, Robbie Ray is not the guy that's going to go out there when the problem is very, very clearly your offense. Robbie Ray is not the guy to go out and get. And again, there's really not that guy out there this year other than Shohei Ohtani, the real big name free agent. And that's fine. It doesn't need to be, like I said in our live stream, you don't need to go shopping at Louis Vuitton, but I also don't want you shopping at Goodwill either. You know, let's get like a Target run in there or something like that. Maybe even a little bit higher class. Maybe let's go to Costco or something. Go get someone who can provide for you every day in that lineup, but don't go out and get AJ Pollock and whatnot. And Jeff Passan had mentioned on the show the other day with Brock and Salk that it's time for the Mariners to get uncomfortable, and Jerry Dipoto responded to that in a very interesting way.
It's time the Mariners need to get uncomfortable, whether that's through salary or a trade. Do you feel like this is an off season where you've got to push those comfortabilities?
We already have, you know, and and I know Jeff is in and out, and no one in the business knows the league better than Jeff does. And, you know, I agree with him that we need to go add talent. You know, we have gone out and made, you know, the summer of 2021, you know, or 2022, we made a very uncomfortable trade for an organization where we put together a ton of talent to go acquire a really talented pitcher. And then we signed him long term, and we did take the plunge on doing a long, potentially career long deal with our, you know, budding star in center field. We will continue to do those things. And, you know, being uncomfortable is part of our jobs. You know, I want to be uncomfortable every day. The moment I get comfortable, we're in trouble. And, you know, I don't know how to express it in a different way than that. We're constantly looking to move the needle, and, you know, it's.
So I guess to sort of ask some of that another way, is the organization over the last few years, right, since the rebuild started in 2018, if I understand right, one of the goals of that is to build up the talent and assets at the minor league level, system-wide, et cetera. Is the organization in a place now where you can afford to deal from your system and still maintain that sustainable winner spot that you want to be in?
Yeah, I think so. And, the end result is that we have built what we believe is one of the top farm systems in baseball, one of the best young rosters in baseball with a strong foundation. We've had a sniff of the zone that we want to live in last year. That we missed on it this year. We want to get back. Everybody's hungry to do it. We're willing to cede some of that minor league talent to achieve what we want to achieve in the here and now, because we believe that our window's open. What we won't do is we won't go out and make many trades that empty our system of the talent that we think is going to allow us to continue to sustain this. In the here and the now, we have payroll flexibility going into next year. We have talent, and it's a matter of whether those lines up, those two things line up. And, I think the idea that we have continually gotten better. We try very hard to be thoughtful in what we're doing, because we want this not just to be an exercise for 2022 and 2023. We want this to be 2024 and well beyond. And I do think that we have the talent, both at the major and minor league levels, to make that happen.
So in terms of being uncomfortable, Jerry Dipoto says, oh yeah, we've already been uncomfortable. You were uncomfortable signing your star center fielder to a long-term contract. It made you uncomfortable to go out and trade for a front of the line starting pitcher in Luis Castillo. I don't necessarily know if that's the way it should be looked at, because obviously the Mariners have shown a willingness to not sign free agent contracts. That's what makes them uncomfortable. Making trades, thinking that you're maybe bargain bin hunting when they've traded for guys in the past, sure. That is something that they're very comfortable doing. The Luis Castillo one, I can understand why when you're giving up guys like Noelvi Marte. But overall, that's still a trade that I bet you 9 out of 10 general managers make. I think it's time for the Mariners to go out there and do something bold. And Jerry Dipoto mentioned that they have the money and the payroll flexibility to go out and do that. Of course they're going to say that. Whether or not they can actually prove it, that they actually have this payroll flexibility, I'm not sure. What does that mean? What does payroll flexibility mean to them? Does that mean they can spend $20 million this offseason? Or does that mean they have $50, $60, $70 million to spend this offseason and get a multitude of guys? There's still so much that we have questions that we'll never get the answer to, but there is one thing that I think is very, very important that Jerry says at the very end of this, and I think we all do need to take a listen to it and kind of take it to heart here.
I think, and I hope that there is an impatience among the fan base that, predates your time here in Seattle. I don't think anybody holds you responsible for anything before you got here, but been a long haul for a lot of Mariners fans for a long time. And I think the word patience is hard for many to hear because of how much it's taken over the years. Good luck to you. This offseason is a big one, and the opportunity to try to bring in the next couple group of players that are going to help this team go good to great, I think is something of significant importance to this Mariners fan base.
There's no doubt of it. And then, believe me when I tell you, I don't take it lightly. As a lifelong baseball fan, I get it. And, we're doing the best that we can to deliver it as quickly as we can, but we're just not going to take shortcuts. And that's been our goal throughout, and we will continue to try to address all of our needs in a way that we think, gives us a chance to win World Series over and over. And that's the goal, and I hope the fans hear that.
First of all, I like that it's mentioned that they hope that Jerry knows that there's an impatience among the fan base because it's been 47 years. The fan base has been here for 47 years and never seen this team make the World Series. But I also really appreciate the fact that Jerry Dipoto says, yeah, I understand that, but I'm not going to take shortcuts. Because if you start taking shortcuts on rosters, that's when you see things like the 2014 Seattle Mariners or whatever it was. Or bringing up Mike Zunino, for example, way too early, because you're trying to take a shortcut to shorten that path instead of letting things develop. And I think that, yeah, we're all impatient, and I don't blame us for being impatient. But I also think that Jerry Poto's right, we shouldn't take shortcuts, because this is something that we need to see through to the end, and when we do, it's going to hopefully pay off the way we want it to. The problem is just Jerry Dipoto is a very good talker. And again, this team is in a much better spot than it was 10 years ago, but that doesn't mean that the job is done. And while it's in a better spot than it was 10 years ago, do they have the courage to go out there and take that next step? Do they have the courage to go out there and sign some big free agent or make a big trade that is going to take this team to the next level. That is what we need to see from Jerry Dipoto, and then we need to see it this offseason, because this is probably the most important offseason in Mariners history. I said that last year, but now, after the failure that was 2023, whether you look at it as a step forward or not, this is the biggest offseason for the Seattle Mariners, because if things don't go well, let's say the Mariners go out and make another AJ Pollock signing and then call it an offseason, then heads will roll next year when this team gets off to a slow start, because the foundation is there, but time is running out for this regime to take the Mariners as far as they can into the playoffs. They broke the drought, and I appreciate the hell out of them for that, but we need to get the Mariners deep into the playoffs, and we need to see that this team has what it takes year in and year out. And to be fair, we have seen that. 2 straight 90-win seasons, 88-win season. This Mariners team is good, but it needs to take the next step now. We need to see them break that 90-win threshold. We need to see them go out and win the division, because with this foundation, and you've had plenty of time. You've had time. You've had 3 years now of basically, we'll just call all 3 90-win seasons, even though they're not, obviously. We'll call all 3 90-win seasons. Okay, now take the next step, because if you come out next year and you have an 88-win season again and you miss the playoffs by 2 games, everyone's done. Nobody is going to trust what you did with this team anymore, because it's time. The window is open. The time is now. And if you didn't hear everything that Jerry Dipoto talked about in his post-game or post-season press conference, those comments, Joe and I broke it down in this video on the screen now. Go ahead and check that one out. Appreciate you guys watching this one, and go Mariners.